What's up, Wonders of London fans? It's me, Vincent from Wonders of London, and welcome to another tour. Today we are doing the very Mayfair Christmas walk, and we're going to be walking from here by Embankment Station and Villiers Street, looking at some of the wonderful Christmas lights around central London in Westminster. We are of course going into Mayfair. Now generally we start the tour in Trafalgar Square, because you have the wonderful Christmas tree at Trafalgar Square. However, I'm filming this video on the 22nd of November, and the Trafalgar Square Christmas tree will only be arriving it will only be lit rather on the 1st of December, or on or around the 1st of December. So of course today we don't have the famous Trafalgar Square Christmas tree. I'll tell you a bit more about it when we get to Trafalgar Square. But one point of note on Villiers Street is this is where Rudyard Kipling, the famous storyteller and author rather, and he wrote the Jungle Book. He used to live right here on Villiers Street, in between Charing Cross Station and the wonderful Embankment Station. Of course, you've got these lovely orbs by the Princess of Wales pub. Simply gorgeous. At the other end of Villiers Street, we have Charing Cross Station, so we can see the orbs from the other direction. And here by Charing Cross Station, you've got a few works going on at one of the entrances, but we come up on the Strand. Now some people like to call the Strand, or people call the Strand, Strand. In fact, the street name itself is simply Strand without the. But I like to go with C.S. Eliot and, more importantly, Charles Dickens, who both refer to this street as the Strand. And on the Strand we have not quite Christmas trees, but interesting display at the bank Coots, which was a royal bank, the bank for the Queen for a period. Not sure if it still is a royal bank. You got that shiner light on their windows. They're always doing interesting window displays at Coots over there. We've got a little poem: the street lights should not be your night lights. The starlit sky should not be your ceiling. The sun should not be your source of warmth. It's time to shine the spotlight on life on the dark street, in the hope that someday everyone has a place to call home. And down there we can see the Strand. Ooh, someone's playing some music. The Strand lights over there in the distance. We don't actually come here, but we do see some of the Strand lights. But the reason I did come here today was to show you those two cool light displays. But because I am depriving you of a tree, I thought I'd show you the tree here by the hotel at Charing Cross Station. And they've titled it Festival Kindness. It changes colour, so it is a pretty cool. You can donate a gift under the tree of kindness. It's the Claremont Hotel, Network Rail and North Bank supporting this particular tree here by Charing Cross Station. Such a lovely tree. Look at the colours changing as I dim the lights. Now over here by bus stop E, where you got the 87 to Aldwych, 87 to Aldwych, sorry, and the 6 and the 9 buses, we can see a bit more of the wonderful Strand Christmas lights. And in fact, if you look in the centre, it says the North Bank. Technically, officially, there is no North Bank. It's called the Embankment, the Victoria Embankment to be exact. However, we have the south bank on the other side of the river. So we're kind of north of the river at the moment, hence the north bank. And we have the south bank on the other side of the river. And the south bank is one of the most popular places in London. And as such, the North Bank Business Improvement District were trying to curry some of that success, or take some of that success from the South Bank and bring it here to the North Bank Business District. And actually, when I do this tour, we do walking tours. Of course, I call it my #capitalism tour, as I'll tell you in a few moments, once we've crossed onto Trafalgar Square. Now, Christmas lights technically on a street started in the 1950s, around 1957, on the Regent Street. And the reason they started on the Regent Street was #capitalism, as I mentioned earlier. It was basically after the Second World War. We didn't have many people shopping. There was a financial depression, and they needed a way to attract, among many other things, a way to attract shoppers to the shopping district of Regent Street. And they did so by introducing the first ever Christmas lights on the public street. And ever since then, everyone followed suit. Soon after that, a couple of years after the first lights on Regent Street, Oxford Street would follow suit, and Oxford Street would actually start decorating their windows. Another popular shopping area is, of course, Oxford Street. They began decorating their windows, and the rest is history. All around the world where they do celebrate Christmas, we do, of course, have the wonderful Christmas displays. And of course, it's quite fascinating because the lights, the idea of the lights was to attract people to this area. You see the lights, you're like, oh, what's going on there? Take a look, for example, where we are now on Trafalgar Square. We've got the National Gallery over there and the fountains with the lights. You're always intrigued, guided by the lights, and people would want to go there, and that was the idea. And I do find it quite fascinating, especially around Christmas, because we do have the story of Jesus Christ, the birth of the baby Jesus Christ, which is what Christmas is all about. And of course, the North Star led the three wise men, or the star led the three wise men to the place where baby Jesus was resting in a manger. And it's quite fun, quite interesting rather, that we have the Christmas lights doing the same thing, leading people to a place. And of course, the three wise men brought with them the gifts of frankincense, myrrh and gold, I think. I always forget the third one. But it is quite amazing. And of course here, these lights were leading us to the wonderful Trafalgar Square Christmas market. Right there. Simply beautiful. Christmas time at the Trafalgar Square bar. Got the National Gallery, you can see about 4 or 5 Van Goghs, as well as some of the Italian Renaissance masters, and it is simply wonderful. Got some Christmas music going on over there, so not going to stay here very long. Now, quite fittingly, we have some buskers over here by St Martin's in the Fields. Sounds like they're playing Dropkick Murphys, or a version of Dropkick Murphys shipping up to Boston. But of course, this is St Martin's in the Field. And St Martin's in the Field, for Christmas at any rate, they have a lot of wonderful Christmas carol concerts. Generally all year round they do have amazing carols, amazing concerts rather, but for Christmas it's one of the best carol concerts in the land, with tickets selling out sometimes about 6 months in advance. We are now walking on Irving Street towards Leicester Square, and as I walk along Leicester Square we can look at these wonderful lights that look like blankets of stars in the sky. I do love the Irving Street Christmas lights, and as we walk and look at the stars, I'll tell you a bit more about the carols now. In London they have been singing carols for about 800 to 1,000 years, so it is a big tradition. Of course, most of the carols that we have date to the Victorian era, but we do have some old carols dating back to the 13th century, and some to the 15th, 16th and 17th centuries, but it is quite a fascinating tradition. It is of course believed that carols date back to pagan times. As we walk past this bit over here where we have the Leicester Square Christmas market, but the carols are believed to date back to pagan times, when in the winter people would sing to keep their hopes alive, to keep their spirits up. And of course singing would be accompanied by lots of merrymaking and fun having in winter, the coldest, darkest time of the year. And of course also singing was a kind of promise to say that there would be life again, the sun would return, summer was on the way, and we would get through the winter. Now, one of the most interesting carols is "O come all ye faithful," dun, 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 dun. Another busker on Leicester Square, and of course they can sing much better than I can, but that particular carol is very interesting because legend has it, or rumour has it rather, Tracy Chapman, wonderful, love a good bit of Tracy Chapman. But back to the carols, because it was believed that "O come all ye faithful" had a secret message, a coded message to King Charles II. Now there's no historical evidence, it's just one of those kinds of stories that came into existence at some point, but there's no documentary evidence accompanying this. But it was allegedly a message, secret coded message to King Charles II when he was in exile in Europe. He spent a lot of his exile in Paris after the English Civil War in the 1640s had resulted in the royalists, the royal family and their supporters, losing the English Civil War, and of course Oliver Cromwell becoming the Lord Protector, and Charles II was exiled. But how cool would that have been to have a famous carol actually be a secret spy coded message? And speaking of Oliver Cromwell, I'm not the biggest fan of Oliver Cromwell as we look at these chocolate kisses. Now, I don't like Oliver Cromwell for many different reasons, but one of the reasons that I don't like him is that he and the government, not just him, but he and the government technically made Christmas illegal. He was a Puritan, which was a type of very extreme Christian in a certain sense, and of course they believed that many of the traditions that accompanied the Christian religion, particularly those that had Catholic origins, were akin to paganism, and it was part of their ethos to root out paganism. So quite an interesting little bit of the story over there. We are now entering Norris Street to make our way towards Lower Regent Street, but it is here at Norris Street that we have the first of the Christmas angels. And Norris Street rather, Regent Streets, because they started the Christmas lights, often dictate the theme of the area. However, this theme hasn't changed for the last 3 or 4 years, and as such we've often had the same Christmas lights, which is not to say they're not amazing. They're so amazing. It's always wonderful just to see them every year, but this year is quite special because this year we have a lot of new additions and changes to the Christmas lights. We're now on St James's Market, or in St James's Market, and we see this very new, very wonderful and beautiful angel. Now this angel hasn't been here before, so this is my first time. Well, I've seen it on the tour, but this year is my first time seeing this particularly gorgeous angel here in the St James's Market area. We can get a lovely shot of the new angel along with the old angels there. And as we continue around here onto Carlton Street, we get to see some more of the smaller angels, and the angels keep getting bigger and bigger, especially when we get onto Regent Street proper. We will see the massive angels, but even before we do, at the end of Carlton Street, have a look at these angels behind the giveaway sign. It is simply gorgeous. And the architecture just complements them so well. If you come on the right time, you get a lot of London buses going past here. You can kind of see in the City of Westminster truck there, the bin truck, the commercial waste truck, but you can get reflections of the lights in front of a London bus. How amazing would that be for a touristic photo? But here we are with the spirit of Christmas. The Regent Street Angels, the first of the Regent Street Angels. We're going to go on to Regent Street proper, but first let's have a look at the St James's tree. And there, just ahead of us, behind the telephone booth, is the lovely St James's Christmas tree. This is usually my favourite Christmas tree in London, but it's the last Christmas tree I'm going to show you on this tour, because we're going to do a special video for you guys of the Christmas trees of London. But this is the lovely St James's Christmas tree, and I wanted to show you because of its location. It is of course in the St James's area of London, and we are technically in Mayfair now. We're just on the border of Mayfair and the sort of Leicester Square, Piccadilly areas. But here we get a lovely view of the tree and the angels in the distance there, with the London bus going past. Simply amazing. And as I mentioned, the location is quite important because it is right here by the Crimean War Memorial of the 1850s, and we actually have the great Florence Nightingale right over here. So we'll come round to the front to see the wonderful Florence Nightingale over here. And there is Florence Nightingale. And the Crimean War was actually a massive scandal for us because we did not look after our soldiers very well. They had defective clothes, defective weaponry. They were freezing, suffering frostbite, sometimes losing digits, maybe limbs due to the frostbite. So it was quite a terrible thing. So much so that in 1855, the women of London got together, mainly the women of London, not just the women of London, and England and Britain got together to make care packages to send to our soldiers, because our soldiers were not getting vegetables. They were suffering from scurvy in the cold, and it was quite a terrible situation for them to be in, especially as they were fighting for us and our freedoms. I'm just going to cross over here. So in 1855, and you can actually find this in the Times newspaper, they actually did you can actually access their archives and read the article they wrote, and sometimes it's in the Guardian newspaper as well, so you can actually see that article from 1855 telling us the care packages they sent to the soldiers, the blankets and good equipment, and proper sort of clothes. And war and Christmas has always been kind of interlinked. It makes for powerful stories. To give an example of what I mean, how many of you will be kissing under the mistletoe this year? Now, we have many legends as to where the idea of kissing under the mistletoe comes from. My personal favourite is the one I'm going to tell you. It is said that the Druids, when they saw the mistletoe tree growing on the oaks that they so revered, they so loved, they so worshipped, they thought it must be a powerful plant. And as such, it was said, according to some sources, that if you met an enemy under the mistletoe, you were not allowed to fight them, and in some cases you should embrace them. And as such, that would eventually evolve to become kissing under the mistletoe. And it's quite a fascinating thing because it brings us to the Christmas Eve of 1914, when we had World War I, and we have the famous Christmas time armistice, or winter sort of peacetime. And one evening in no man's land, our soldiers heard the enemy soldiers, the Germans, singing carols in the dark, deep cold of the night. And the next day, our boys went into no man's land, and the Germans came into no man's land, and instead of fighting, they exchanged gifts, and they actually sang carols together, and they played the famous game of football, which you may have seen in some of the television adverts of a few years ago. And it was quite a fascinating thing, just seeing the power Christmas has to bring people together. And in fact, a fascinating little historical anecdote as we turn into Jermyn Street in Mayfair now, firmly in Mayfair. And we've got the Jermyn Street Angels up over here. An interesting little anecdote about that Christmas is that there was not one massive football game, as the ads and the stories and the movies sometimes display. In fact, it happened not just in no man's land, but in many different parts where the conflict was being fought, where people for that day, thanks to the power of Christmas, came together. And it was quite an interesting thing. But here we have Jermyn Street, so named after Mr. Henry Jermyn, who was one of the pioneers of this area, and of course one of the pioneers of Mayfair. Now, it is here on Jermyn Street, close to one of the sites where Sir Isaac Newton actually lived, that we meet the first of arcades. Very simply decorated, but lovely Prince's Arcade, right here. The second of our arcades is being gazed at by the wonderful Beau Brummel, the Georgian dandy, who is said to have invented the three-piece suit. It too has an entrance and exit on Jermyn Street, but unfortunately they have not yet decorated the arcade. I often love the decorations of these arcades, of this arcade in particular, but we do have one more arcade to have a look at. Now, before we go to our third arcade, let's have a look at the entrance to Fortnum and Mason, looking wonderfully Christmassy over here. Then we're going to have a look at the facade of Fortnum and Mason. Fortnum and Mason this year have gone a little bit understated, and part of their statement is to do with the energy crisis. So they haven't decorated as much, but it is still quite beautiful. And among many other things, Fortnum and Mason claim to have invented the Scotch egg for long journeys, but they also claim to have introduced baked beans to England. Because did you know baked beans were actually an American invention, and they're actually brought to England and London by a buyer from Fortnum and Mason, where we see the sign 2022 there. The wonderful Fortnum and Mason, looking slightly different from usual, but still gorgeous and amazing, with the advent calendar theme, brings us onto Piccadilly Street with some more of the wonderful Christmas spirit angels. And let me tell you, the angels are going to get bigger and better. Now, right here, close to one of the Piccadilly Street angels, we actually have the amazing Burlington Arcade. And the Burlington Arcade, for the last 2 years, their Christmas decorations have been to promote films. Last year, I believe it was the James Bond movie, and this year it's the movie Babylon, with Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie, and Diego Calva. And they have lovely baubles and stars here in Burlington Arcade. And once we come out of the Burlington Arcade, we're going to be on Bond Street. And Bond Street have changed their lights this year. Last year they had the peacocks, and this year we have a different theme. But let's walk through a very beautiful Burlington Arcade. Now, the Burlington Arcade and the other arcades are considered by some to be the first shopping centres in the world, which is quite a fascinating thing. Of course, others would argue that the first shopping centres in the world were elsewhere, but these are technically purpose-built shopping centres. And quite interestingly, you'd have the shops on the ground floor, and a lovely elephant over here. You wouldn't have an elephant in the middle, but we've got an elephant sculpture. But you'd have the shops on the ground floor and some houses and apartments at the top. But one of the interesting things about the apartments on the upstairs is they were sometimes, not always, and not all of them, and at different periods in history, sometimes leased to members of the oldest profession in the world. And I love these little dark tidbits of history hidden around the now so very beautiful part of London. This used to actually be a garden of the Burlington House, and the brother of the owner of Burlington House actually hated it because this is the middle of sort of Mayfair, and quite close by we have the more seedy Soho. So people coming from partying in Soho would often walk past the gardens of Burlington House and throw their oysters into the gardens. And the brother really hated this, so he decided to build the Burlington Arcade. And initially he wanted to have shops in the Burlington Arcade that would be run by women only. But that didn't go as according to plan. He wanted to give women an opportunity at employment, but that didn't go as according to plan. But as we've turned left outside the Burlington Arcade, we have arrived here at Bond Street. And have a look at these gorgeous lights. Simply beautiful. Bond Street has some of the most elite shops. Mayfair is a very well-to-do district. In fact, it has been claimed that it is the most elite postcode or address in the world. Of course, those at the Bishop's Avenue in North London would argue differently, and those at the Millionaires Row in Marylebone would argue differently, and folks from other parts of the world would of course argue differently as well. But it is quite a fascinating place, and you can see it in some of the shops that are here on Bond Street. And in fact, there is no such place as Bond Street, even though all Londoners and everyone calls it Bond Street. You actually have two streets making up the same street, and these two streets are known as New Bond Street and Old Bond Street. But there we have Omega, Jaeger, Le Couture, Bottega Veneta. You've got Damiani, Cartier, Valentino, Vacheron Constantin, and several others. Now here we have a look at the wonderful Bond Street Christmas lights. As I mentioned, they had the peacock theme for about 8 years now, so they've decided to change it with a royal theme in conjunction with the Queen's Platinum Jubilee and her sad passing. May Queen Elizabeth II rest in peace. And in fact, they've used around 93,652 LED lights to do this display, and it is quite brilliant. It's just as amazing as the peacock display, and in fact these lights have shapes mirroring the shimmering platinum, gold, diamond and pearl necklaces that you can find on sale aplenty right here on Bond Street. Now, I know I said we're not going to look at any other Christmas trees today, and in fact we are going to do a London Christmas tree video for you guys here on YouTube, so do give us a follow and look out for that. But this Christmas tree that you just saw briefly, and those up over there, make up the display of Ralph Lauren. And Ralph Lauren has had some wonderful displays the last couple of years. Before, I never liked the Ralph Lauren Christmas display here on Bond Street, but it is quite fantastic. And as we turn around opposite Ralph Lauren, we have the brilliant Cartier display. Now, I missed last year's Cartier display because it was quite musical. At certain points of the evening they would play music. Next to it we have Chanel, the first Chanel with Once Upon a Moon, and they've got the moon and stars right there. And as we continue, we've got the wonderful Piaget. I love this little, very simple, very understated, but effective, I do think, with the flashing lights. It looks almost like fireworks, as you can see there. As we continue, we've got Bulgari. They used to have an encrusted serpent, but they no longer do this year. And we're approaching the bit where New Bond Street becomes Old Bond Street. And before we do get there, you have Hublot. Whenever I do the tour, because we do come here on the very Mayfair Christmas walking tour, some people, not always, not me as well, but some people do say it looks like Hublot got their decorations from Morrison's. But as we continue up over here, we got Dior and the second Chanel have no decorations this year. Some places are actually not going to do decorations. As I mentioned with Fortnum and Mason having a statement about the cost of living crisis and of course the energy crisis. Some places might not have decorations this year. And of course, we've already seen the one Chanel shop with decorations, but here's Louis Vuitton. I'm going to cross over to Louis Vuitton, looking quite interesting with their Christmas display. And this is pretty cool because they got the green for the Christmas tree. Did you guys know, technically in some cultures, the original color of Christmas was green, but hashtag capitalism, a certain organization changed the color to red to match, allegedly, their own color. But look at that, Dior, Christian Dior have outdone themselves this year. How lovely is that? And we can cross over in a couple of moments to have a look at the Christian Dior window display. Always be careful crossing over here. There are lots of cars. Can be a bit confusing. But there is the Dior window display. Simply lovely. Couldn't afford anything on this street, so let us leave Old New Bond Street and let's make our way to Bruton Street. Now Bruton Street, B-U-R-T-O-N, if I'm not mistaken, is where Queen Elizabeth II, may she rest in peace, was born. Coming off New Bond Street by Hermes, we turn left over here onto Bruton Street. Bruton Street boasts the lovely Coach and Horses pub over here, and as we turn to continue along Bruton Street towards Berkeley Square, we have the lovely, simple Bruton Street Christmas lights there. Now, as well as having many supercar dealerships like Bugatti and Bentley over there, Bruton Street is, as I mentioned, where on this site at 17 Bruton Street stood the townhouse of the Earl of Strathmore and Kinghorn, where Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor, later to become Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, was born on the 21st of April 1926. So if you've ever wondered where the Queen was born, now you know. All the way in the distance over there, on the other side of Berkeley Square Gardens, or Berkeley Square Gardens, we have Bruton Street, where we've just come from. And on the other side of the 22 bus to Oxford Circus there, we have Annabelle's, the club. And Annabelle's usually have some amazing, intricate, amazing, simply beautiful designs. But this year, like with many other places, they are keeping it simple for their Christmas display. And there is the Annabelle's Christmas display. Annabelle's is a private members club. Membership is quite costly. Here we are with the Annabelle's display. Another wonderful Mayfair Street, not too far from Annabelle's, is none other than Mount Street. And Mount Street has this gorgeous display of blue bows. In the distance you can make out one of the towers from one of the rides at Winter Wonderland. But there is the Mount Street bows. Gorgeous. On Davy Street, just off Mount Street, we have the Dunhill display that we just looked at, and then we have hedonism wines and their lovely reindeer display right here. It's a really nice wine shop in Mayfair. And I do like their Christmas decorations. 2 years ago they had amazing Christmas decorations. Last year I didn't quite understand the decorations, but this year they are amazing once again. Now, in the other direction of Bond Street, if you come off New Bond Street, in the other direction of Britain Street, you have Conduit Street. And we're now walking down the last part of Conduit Street, which takes us into Regent Street. And quite busy here. They did want to pedestrianise the Oxford and Regent Streets, but they never did it. But sometimes for Christmas they do pedestrianise Conduit Street, which we're on now. Let me tell you, it makes a massive difference walking without the cars and not having to cross. Of course, Conduit Street has this sort of wonderful ivy beam, which is nice, but it really accentuates the Regent Street angels. Look at those beautiful angels. The spirit of Christmas indeed. Very lovely. And just there before it goes, we have a Christmas bus. Very nice. But here are the Regent Street Angels, or at least one of them, in all their majesty. Our final stop is going to be the wonderful Carnaby Street to have a look at some of the Carnaby Street Angels. But here it is, the spirit of Christmas glittering through the night. Beautiful. And once we've crossed over Regent Street, as we've done now, we enter Carnaby Soho. We have effectively left Mayfair. Regent Street forms the border, technically, of Mayfair, and we are now walking over Kingly Street to go on to Carnaby Street proper. And I do love the Carnaby Streets. Every year they do something interesting. Often the Carnaby Streets are politicised, talking about something going on with the world. The last 3 years it's been about the climate and the environment, and of course we can see the planet over there, the globe in the centre as we approach Carnaby Street. How lovely is that? We've got the planets as well. And welcome to Carnaby Street celebrates Christmas. Is this just fantasy? Look up to the sky. Oh, cool! Because a few years ago, they had, for the release of Bohemian Rhapsody, the movie.
Okay, yeah.
They had. It was so cool. The quotes from Bohemian Rhapsody, the song by Queen, and it looks like they've recycled a little bit of that. So that is pretty cool. You've got Liberties over there. As we come up here, we can start and walk all the way down the very busy Carnaby Street. Look at all the people. The lights draw them. Well, Carnaby Street's always busy, but with the lights, it gets even busier. Is this just fantasy? Look up to the skies and see. I'm just a poor boy and I cannot sing. So I'll stop there. But I love Queen. Some robins over there. Wonderful. We've got a snowman. And of course, the famous Carnaby Union flag, Union Jack, under the crown. Very regal and royal. So let us know, which are your favourite lights? I think this year in Mayfair at any rate, excluding Oxford Street, the Carnaby Street lights are my favourite. These are always here, of course. They mix many different things: shine, dream, smile, dance. Shine, smile, dream, dance. We got Doc Martens, Replay, Scotch and Soda. Got the Rolling Stones shop for Rolling Stones and merch. We've got a pop-up store at the end. Let's check out what the pop-up store is now. Rolling Stones there. I see a red door and I want to paint it black. No colors anymore. Simply fantastic. Now, when earlier I mentioned one of the Christmas lights were Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody lyrics emblazoned in the night. And that year they had the shop at the end. They're always changing what happens there. But they had the Queen store, and now they have something called Christiana S. Williams Studio. Art pop-up. So it's an art pop-up shop right there. And we've arrived at the end of Carnaby Street. Do let us know, which are your favourite Christmas lights? And hope you've enjoyed yourselves going through Mayfair, starting in Trafalgar Square, going to Mayfair and ending here in Carnaby Street. Oh cool, I think these are from last year, these two. But thank you so much for joining us. I've been Vincent from Wonders of London. Do hope you've enjoyed this video, mini tour of our very Mayfair Christmas. And do look out for the Christmas tree video. We're going to do an amazing Christmas tree video for you, including some of the trees we've seen today, but including many more amazing trees. We're still waiting for the St. Paul's Cathedral Christmas tree to go up, so that Christmas tree is going to be quite brilliant. But I've been Vincent, there are the Rolling Stones. I do hope you have a lovely rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, etc., wherever you are. Bye.